All right, as we continue to bring you more updates, remember on the sidelines of the G20 Summit in the national capital, a memorandum of understanding was also signed between the governments of India, the US, Saudi Arabia, the European Union, the UAE, France, Germany, Italy, and more to establish the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC. It's the big corridor that we've been talking about, the significance of which, more and more details of which is now coming out in the open. The IMEC is a network of transport corridors, including railway lines, sea lanes, that is expected to aid economic growth through integration between Asia, Arabian Gulf, Europe, and the project is a part of the Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment, PGII, a Western Bloc-led initiative for funding infrastructure projects across the world, also seen as a counter to China's Belt and Road Initiative. We have more details at this point, Krishna, of what is going to be the roadmap for that economic corridor. And quite literally, the roadmap on the map.
From the euphoria of what you thought is going to be when the announcement came, there's now questions on the logic and the sense it makes. Let me begin with the fact that for whatever that is being announced, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, or the IMEC, fundamentally it's been signed as an MOU between the United Arab Emirates, the US, India and Israel. But it's going to involve other countries. First of all, this is a memorandum of understanding, so you need to look at the final, the exact details that needs to be done. That's going to take another 60 days at least. And the other countries, if I can mention, there is France, Germany, Italy, so there is the European Union as a whole. So all of them have to be on the same page to hammer out the final details of what this corridor is going to be. Now the thing is, what is this corridor going to be? From the map that from the map that we saw initially, we have things that are already in place in the corridor. Like there's a freight corridor in the UAE that already exists, and there is the Haifa port in Israel, which is part of this corridor, where Adani Group already has a major stake in. So the questions are now being raised: is how much is fresh that's going to be made for this corridor, and how much of a sense is it going to make? But in the meanwhile, for the rail links that are going to be built, according to this memorandum of understanding, the rail links are also going to have cables undersea and underground cables being put, and also a pipeline for hydrogen transportation as well. That's going to come up along with these this freight rail corridor. So this IMEC is essentially a combination of rail and shipping. As far as shipping is concerned, there is no doubt in terms of how important shipping is going to be, and the fact that the existing capacities and the existing alliances between, say, Israel and India. Of course, the question is getting Israel and the United Arab Emirates together. That's what this entire deal is all about, because bear in mind, the Belt and Road Initiative of China managed to do the impossible by getting Iran and Saudi Arabia together. But in this case, you're going to get UAE and Israel together. A lot of people are sort of says foretelling problems on that front that could happen, but we'll have to see how that's going to pan out. So certain doubts existing on that corridor, because how much of it is actually a corridor that's being created for a separate purpose, and other doubts being that it's repurposing of existing facilities to create a corridor that looks connected on the map. So we're yet to have some clarity on that front. It's going to be a while before we get finalities on it. Even to get the finalities on what the agreements between countries are going to be, it's going to take at least a couple of months. So we'll have to wait and watch.
But it's going to be shorter than what we initially expected, because we were hoping that there was going to be perhaps a transcontinental rail network, or perhaps a transcontinental connectivity, a hard connectivity. That's not going to happen. The sea links continue to exist.
Yes.
Ports continue to be in place. There is railway network, freight corridor. All of that is obviously in place. So what is now needed perhaps is a possible mapping of the route and connectors to be put in place.
Exactly. And therein lies the optimism for companies in India, infrastructure companies in India, rail infrastructure companies in India. If you can attribute today's rail stocks shooting up in today's trade, they've been on an upswing for a while now. Their optimism could have come from that whiff of optimism for the day at least could have come from the fact that there could be orders coming Indian rail companies' way if India is going to be involved in the building of a transcontinental rail freight corridor. So, these are projections, Shweta, at this stage. If it's going to be built somewhere else, are the orders going to come to Indian companies? We don't know. How much of it is going to be built, and what are going to be the final nitty-gritties of who is going to contribute, how much the costs. The biggest question on this corridor, Shweta, at this stage is the cost of making this corridor, and who is going to be contributing how much in that overall cost basket of making this corridor.
Right, but at least there is a map now. There is a map that that has been, we've been able to trace that map. As you can see on your screens, an eastern corridor and a northern corridor. Perhaps that will culminate the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, contours of which have been proposed. Hard details are yet to come out. The map on your screen is going to be ultimately what's going to lead into better freight, better trade, transport facilities with all these 3 blocks, or rather 4 blocks combined, because from Europe comes the US. But staying on with G20 and the official state visit of the Saudi Arabia Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's here in India, we have since this morning brought you visuals of what could mean by the way of a bilateral agreement between the 2 nations. At this point, we have more details of an MOU that was signed. In fact, various MOUs that have been signed between the 2 nations that is now coming out. Details are here.
8 of them, that's what we understand. The latest, the final statement after the meeting. So we're talking about, it begins of course by talking about the IMEC, which is a monumental achievement at the time of G20. But it's the 2 sides have also agreed to expedite the India GCC Free Trade Agreement negotiations, which is another big headline coming from it. The GCC being the Gulf Cooperation Council. So India and the Gulf Cooperation Council Free Trade Agreement that we're talking about, the negotiations which they say that took place in this trip of the UAE for G20 is going to act as a catalyst. That's, I'm reading straight from the statement, Shweta. That's how good this particular visit has been. India, Saudi Arabia have started conversations on trading in national currencies as well. That's according to the MEA Secretary of Saudi Arabia, Ausaf Saeed, and also speaking of the situation of the India blue-collar workers in the kingdom. So this visit by the state visit of Crown Prince and the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, Prince Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, yielding a lot of results, and the fact that he was sitting on that podium right next to the Prime Minister Modi with Joe Biden on the other end had a lot of tongues wagging as well. But clearly, the conversation between MBS and PM Modi have gone on very well. 8 MOUs being signed and a free trade agreement negotiation with the Gulf Cooperation Council being initiated.
All right. So those, of course, are extremely substantial developments that have come in by the way of that negotiation between Saudi Arabia, bilateral talk between Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and India. Remember, this is a state visit of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. He is here for today. He is expected to leave by the end of today, but important developments there coming in, and this is an extension of the G20 Summit. We continue to bring you all the details right here on News 9.